just another story of the same. What's up, y'all? Welcome back for another episode of The Whole Bushel.
We'll keep that.
See that again. Wrong show. What's up, y'all? Welcome back for another episode of the Baltimore Bureau Podcast Show. I'm Eze Jackson here with Dharna Noor.
Hello.
And our guest host today is my good friend Height Keech.
Hey, thanks for having me.
What's up, man?
Not much. Feeling good.
I think you're having the same thing I'm having, where I never know which camera to look at. I'm like,
Which
hey,
one do I
how's it
look
going, y'all? What's up?
Yeah, I just don't look at. I think I look like over here somewhere. I'm just like, what's up? So you've been touring a lot this year or this summer, and then you have your 1,000th show coming up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought it would be a cool thing to kind of commemorate. Like, I've really never done anything like that before. You know, like people will be like, "Oh, it's the something anniversary of such and such album you did," and it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, nobody's checking for that. But I feel like 1,000th
show.
Yeah, you can't do like. I got to do it now. You can't do it for like 1,007th show or something.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to do it big. So yeah, I'm doing this show at Metro Gallery.
When is it?
November 2nd.
November 2nd.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. I don't know.
I'm going to join you with my good friend Emily.
That's right, Emily Slaughter.
Emily Slaughter.
Dope.
We did the old school album a few years ago.
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
It really was. I was thinking the other day, that was kind of like how you and I really started hanging out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we played shows and stuff before, but that was like...
Oh, yeah, because we were making that album and coming over and rehearsing it and getting it down. That was dope.
What a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I did this, like a old school album. The idea was supposed to sound like Cold Crush Brothers or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Easy, like, just killed it. I actually ended up doing 3 albums in that kind of style, and all released in close succession, you know. But he, like, all his like acting chops and stuff came out. Like he did skits and he was like singing on stuff, and I don't know. I feel like you really took the idea of like playing a character. And
that was fun, man. It was funny because when you hit me about it, it was something I actually always kind of wanted to do.
Oh,
like, you know, like as a kid, like I grew up in the 80s, so like that style was like my first introduction to rap. You know what I mean? And rap has evolved so much since then lyrically. But it's always fun to like go back and, you know what I mean, and like experience that, feel that flavor. So that was dope. Yeah.
And you're working on some new stuff too, right?
Yeah. I'm working on a new album now. It's gonna be a while, but it's cool to be like off tour and like focused on some new material.
And you have Cold Rhymes Records now, which is your label, and y'all been putting out some dope stuff.
Oh, thanks.
Like, how's that been going, that transition from, you know, being an independent artist to actually, like, running a label now?
It's been really good. It's like, so in the past year, our mutual friend, Brian Lackner, a.k.a. Mr.
From Passalacqua,
in Detroit. He's been doing it with me. He's been doing a lot of the art and the video stuff. And and also I Alive from Philly. So it's been like a group effort, you know?
Nice.
And it's like, I don't know, it's just been really fun and exciting to like bring these releases to the surface that wouldn't be made otherwise, you know.
Right.
Are you like going out and finding artists and being like, hey, y'all should be on my label? Or is it like,
you know, it's funny, I have done some of that, but it's like, just to be frank, it's like such a small operation that it's not like, I don't know, sometimes I meet groups and I'm really interested in what they do, but just to be frank, it's not like I can do much for them that they can't do for themselves.
Right.
So it's more like just like, does it...
If you want to come into this thing with us, like...
And it's usually seems like it is more likely to happen if it's some kind of like creative thing, like they want help with production or artwork or whatever, you know. So
cool.
Yeah.
Right.
That's dope.
Yeah, man, dope. Just so y'all know, we have we always talk about our upcoming events. We have the Whole Bushel coming on October 24th, the Whole Bushel Live at Ida B's Table. It will be the last the Whole Bushel Live of the season, as crabs are hard to get in the off season. So
last crab feast of the summer, or well, the year, I guess.
Yeah. So get your tickets on Eventbrite. $50 per person, $80 for a couple. We'll have Kiki Martin, formerly of the R&B group ISIS, and Rufus Roundtree and the Be More Brass Factory performing 7 p.m. October 24th at Ida B's Table. Y'all want to get in these stories?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The first story, we have been covering the Maryland gubernatorial race a lot. Shout out to Eze Noor, who's been on it. This one, he interviews Mark Steiner on Ben Jealous getting Obama's endorsement and whether or not that will help him defeat current Republican Governor Larry Hogan. Let's check this out.
Barack Obama endorsed Democratic candidate for governor of Maryland Ben Jealous on Monday, October 1st. In the second round of endorsements from the former president. This comes a week after dozens of Democratic officials rallied behind the former NAACP CEO. Maryland's incumbent Republican governor, Larry Hogan, maintains a sizable lead, but according to the latest polls, Jealous has been boosted by a strong performance in the only scheduled debate, as well as his first round of TV ads, reducing Hogan's lead from 22 to 15 points the week before. Hogan does maintain a 10-to-1 margin in fundraising, and some Maryland Democrats have either publicly backed him or refused to back Ben Jealous. And Democrats nationally have failed to match the over $2 million Republicans have already poured into a barrage of negative attack ads. I recently asked Jealous to respond to a Baltimore Sun article about fellow Democrats that aren't backing him.
We've opened 24 counties across the state. We've hired 50 organizers. We have the support of our entire party leadership all throughout the state. And we have the opportunity here to take back the State House. The governor's scared because he knows we can turn out way more than 1 million voters and he can't. We did it in 2010, and that's what we'll do this year.
And what his strategy is for the final weeks of the campaign.
I'm going to win this general the same way I won the primary. I defied every pollster, defied every pundit. What did we do? We stayed focused on organizing door to door and talking to people about what they know matters. How we move forward on education, how we move forward boldly on health care, how we move forward together to build a more robust economy, how we get back to being safe. Under this governor, our schools have fallen from 1st to 6th. Healthcare costs have surged. The economy is so stuck that if we had the job growth of Virginia, we'd have 40,000 more jobs, and yet their job growth is below the national average. And murders are up outside of Baltimore City, 42% in the other 23 counties, and even higher still when you include Baltimore. Folks know that we need a plan to move forward, and I'm the only one with a plan, let alone a bold plan.
For more analysis, we talked to Mark Steiner, longtime radio host and currently a Real News correspondent. What impact is Barack Obama's endorsement going to have on Ben Jealous?
It could potentially have an incredible impact on the campaign. The question is, for me, knowing how these campaigns work, will that translate into Barack Obama doing two things? A, raising money for Ben Jealous nationally, and B, coming to Maryland to speak out, let's say walking with Ben Jealous in Baltimore or somewhere in the D.C. suburbs, Prince George's County someplace, to really kind of rev up the excitement for Ben Jealous. That's where the rubber meets the road. Endorsement's great, but he has to take it one step beyond, I think, to make a real effect.
I think Mark is really right that this could be a huge, boost for the Jealous campaign. But I think it's going to take some, I don't know, hands-on. Yeah, I think it's going to take some hands-on, like, Mark, I think, mentioned, like, oh, if Obama came and did, like, a walk through Baltimore with Jealous, yeah, that would be great for him. But, but it's kind of funny, too, to see, like, Jealous so strongly trying to, like, distance himself from, like, the legacy of, like, corporate Democrats and stuff, and then being like, oh, well, everybody still loves Obama, despite all of that, with, I mean, kind of for obvious reasons. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch. I personally am starting to see more people like see through the games. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, I'm critical of Ben Jealous a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's a venture capitalist, yet has, you know, backing from Bernie Sanders, a socialist. You know, then there's there's the Obama endorsement now. You know, apparently there's supposed to be a Dave Chappelle event coming soon. And I mean, these things work. Like, they definitely work and have worked over the years. But I'm curious to see whether or not, or how much people are actually buying into it or falling for it. I think that the ground game that he's doing is most impressive because he's got SEIU down and they don't play around. And you know, my experience.
Unions,
I was thinking the other day about how, if this had been a couple years ago, even if there's certain platforms that have just gone away, like if the city paper was still here, and if they still on 88.9 still had like the main shows, that
Sean Yo's, Mark Steiner,
I was thinking about with Ben Jealous, like I haven't really been hearing about the race the way
you would have. That's true. Yeah.
And I think really you guys are the only place that's. I mean, I'm so glad you have Mark Steiner. I was starstruck when I saw him out there. But I'm so glad that this is like the one place where they're really talking about it. But I don't know. I wonder if it would have been easier even a couple years ago to have to get anything except a mainstream position out there. You know?
Yeah, because they used to do that the weekly like countdown, so it was like, or like ranking. So it was like, this week, so and so is like down 5 because they did this stupid thing.
Right.
But that was informative. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, yeah, you're right.
And also, like, I kind of like that type of shit because you can like pay attention to the kind of smaller personality things that candidates are doing, like when Ben Jealous like had that weird like clapback at that reporter who was like, okay, but really, are you a socialist? And he's like, are you fucking kidding me? Are we gonna get taken off YouTube because I'm like quoting Ben Jealous and saying the word fuck? I don't know. Whatever. We'll see.
We'll see.
We can bleep this out or something maybe. But it's cool because like when it's just like down 5 points, up 5 points thing, you can look at those like kind of weird personality things, but in the bigger context of like, which one of you is going to support single payer healthcare? Right. Obviously not Larry Hogan. Which one of you is going to support like more funding for education? Obviously not Larry Hogan. So like,
it's a lack of outlets to really have those conversations because, you know, I mean, let's face it, I'm probably going to vote for the candidate that's going to do those things. You know what I mean? But I just feel like people are kind of over the traditional campaign games.
Right. I was wondering what is your critique of Ben Jealous? You said he was a venture capitalist before.
I mean, I like him. He'll definitely be better than Larry Hogan. I just am not convinced that he's as liberal as he's putting himself up to be. I think that a lot of the unions and a lot of the liberal organizations and groups that are backing him are going to be very disappointed when he becomes governor and he doesn't do the things that he said because he can't.
So you think that he's not going to follow through on some of his promises?
Yeah, I don't think he can. You know what I mean? I think this is a good time to sell Marylanders on, you know, the possibility of somebody coming in and doing it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, with the Trump administration and the amount of weak, watered-down Democrats we have in Maryland, there's not the support there for him to actually get done what he's saying he's going to be able to do.
Yeah.
But wouldn't he, even at like, if he gets like 25% of it done, isn't that still kind of doing a better job?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. It just doesn't mean I can't still, you know.
Push for more.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I still would like 75 to 100% of what he says he's going to do. But yeah, you're right.
It's weird because it seems like in the national media, they seem more convinced that he'll win. Yeah. Like, it's more like, oh, yeah, it's a blue state. Yeah. You know, they have this very ostensibly left
Yeah.
candidate, but I don't think that's the real.
No, I mean,
yeah,
we've,
he's like 15%
Yeah.
or 15 points down in the polls right
Yeah.
now. So,
and we've literally ping-ponged with our governors. Like, we had a Republican governor, then we got a Democrat governor, now we got a Republican governor. You know what I'm saying? So even though it is a Democrat state, it's very vulnerable in terms of the governor's seat.
yeah. And also, it's interesting what you said, like, what y'all were saying about how, we have like a strong Democratic, but like sort of a mainstream Democratic base here. But like, I think what Jessel's reporting has kind of showed me is like, if you ask people about the issues, like, would you support, and then just basically describing like a public jobs program, people will be like, yeah, of course. But if you say, would you support a public jobs program? People are like, oh, no, that's socialist. I don't want that.
Right.
Or like single payer healthcare. Like, would you support being able to go to the hospital and like having, no copay and like whatever, but having like slightly higher taxes to support this? Obviously, people are going to say yes, but you hear single payer and a lot of people are turned off by that.
Right.
And I think that's something that's kind of working against Jealous is like, I don't know. I think he's maybe not like the world's greatest public speaker. So if he could bring people in a little bit more with like the substance of the policy instead of like the buzzwords, I think that would be.
Yeah, and then I mean, the problem is the base too. Like, Democrats are very divided right now. You know what I mean? You have the ones who are willing to play establishment ball and keep that going, and then you got people that are going really far left and they're just sick of the shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, that whereas the Republican Party is very unified, no matter what dumbass they have running to represent them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, it's just like, well, he's our dumbass. Like, fuck it. Like, let's go. But let me see. You got a story this week. The new EPA proposal could have huge health impact for vulnerable communities.
Yeah. I've been doing a bunch of national stuff lately. I think mostly just because, like, the federal government is obviously with the Kavanaugh hearings and everything such a shit show.
Yeah.
God, we're definitely gonna get taken off YouTube. I'm sorry, everyone. So this kind of like, while the Kavanaugh hearings and everything, and I did like some interviews on that too, but like while all of that is happening, sort of under the radar have been going all of these other small things. And so this interview was actually about like one paragraph that's hidden in this new proposed EPA rule, which is supposed to boost transparency for like the kinds of regulations that the EPA can make, like the kind of environmental regulations. But buried in this one paragraph is like this big paradigm shift, which basically assumes that like a little bit of exposure to toxins. I feel like toxins is kind of a weird word because it sounds so like Gwyneth Paltrow-y and vague. But like, things like carcinogens, like particulate matter, stuff like that, that can have really harmful impacts. The implication is like, oh, a little bit of exposure to that is okay because you can like build your immune system to it. And there is some research that supports that, except that mad research that supports that is written by this one guy who testified at this hearing yesterday, whose main funder is ExxonMobil, which is just like
insane.
Yeah, it's like it seems like obvious or whatever, but like it sucks to actually hear it. Yeah. So I talked to Mustafa Santiago Ali, who used to work at the EPA, about how obviously the people who are going to be worst affected by this, like with all horrible environmental things, are vulnerable people, like poor people and young people and people of color, especially Black people. So yeah, we can take a look at this.
Yeah, let's check it out.
A cornerstone of the Environmental Protection Agency's policies has been to protect people from the harmful effects of radiation and pollution. And when it comes to these public health risks, the EPA has erred on the side of caution. But a paragraph hidden in a dense new proposal entitled Strengthening Transparency in Regulatory Science could make way for a new approach, which assumes that some exposure to toxins is good for you. The Senate Environment and Public Works Subcommittee held a hearing on the proposal on Wednesday. Let's take a look at a clip from that.
The effect of the rule would be a significant reduction in good, relevant science that could be used by EPA. And the change would likely result in harm to people and the environment. This demonstrates either a deep misunderstanding of how science works or should work, or an intention to cherry pick evidence in the name of transparency.
That's Dr. Rush Holt. And now joining me to discuss this is Mustafa Santiago Ali. Mustafa is the Senior Vice President of Climate, Environmental Justice, and Community Revitalization for the Hip Hop Caucus. And previously, he was Senior Advisor to former EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy on environmental justice and a founding member of the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice. Always a pleasure to have you, Mustafa.
Well, thank you. It's always an honor to be with you.
So talk about what this proposal could mean for the EPA and what that in turn could mean for the people and the planet. Does this proposal on strengthening transparency in regulatory science actually seem like it will strengthen regulators' transparency?
Most definitely not. This is another example of the agency, the current administration at the agency doing everything that they can to help the fossil fuel industry to be able to sort of squeeze out every last dime possible by creating policy that is not protective of people's health, but is protective of those businesses and industries that should be regulated. And they actually should be very much in favor of making sure that they are being protective of the communities where their footprint is and communities across our country. You know, it's interesting that science to the agency is only valuable when it is being beneficial to the fossil fuel industry or to other polluting facilities. But when it comes to people's health, you know, they continue to manipulate science. And the reason that they're doing that, it's very strategic, is to be able to weaken policy.
So speaking of that, there are some environmental health professionals who support the new approach outlined in this proposal, like University of Massachusetts' Edward Calabrese. He spoke at Wednesday's hearing. Let's take a look.
Thus, EPA's transparency proposal is excellent as far as it goes, but it needs to be expanded. The EPA transparency proposal is crucial to enhance public health and should have been adopted in some form 20 or more years ago. Thus, I believe that the EPA has made a bold and constructive proposal that is scientifically sound and should be strongly supported, approved, and implemented. Thank you very much.
What's your response to Calabrese's support? It should be noted that one of his biggest research funders is ExxonMobil.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, you should always take a look at where people's funding is coming from and who their allegiances are. You know, in relationship to science, science should never be a political issue. It is something that should be based upon the facts. It's almost like when folks know 99% of the scientists out there say that climate change is real, and you can go out and find that 1% that doesn't. This is another example of if you look hard enough, you can find someone who will agree with those outliers, with, you know, those things that are far outside of mainstream.
I think one thing that people miss when they're reporting on climate change, and I want to do a better job of this too, is like everyone is actually really afraid to die. Like it's actually really scary. It's not just like numbers on a page. It's like dying is fucking scary.
Yeah. I always say this, like that's one of the things that I like about your coverage and that I get to talk to you about this stuff, because I didn't really understand what was going on. You know what I mean?
Thanks, Eze.
And then when you put it like that, like, yeah, it's pretty serious.
I'm still learning as I'm doing it, which has been cool.
Yeah.
I think when I was younger, when people would talk about like climate change and stuff like that, like I would think like, oh, that's a cool like hobby to think about, or like I was thinking about people were like projecting into like hundreds of years in the future and stuff, and then I feel like millions of people are having this change where they're realizing like, no, this is happening right now.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
they're not just like crazy hippies jumping up and down with a conspiracy theory,
right?
Which I think was like the climate change narrative, like in the 80s.
Oh yeah, for
90s.
sure, 100%.
And it's like, oh, they were right.
Yeah, and I think that kind of like the like environmental activist community or whatever sort of did it themselves by being like, first of all, like just having like a huge history of being like a bunch of white elitists, but also like by not messaging to people in a way where you can actually be like, and the real effects of this are like Miami is going to be underwater. There will be like no certain parts of New York City will just be completely gone. Instead of just like there will be this much more rainfall, and the temperature will increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius, which, like, no, the important thing is that people are going to die.
Totally. I think for me, seeing like how it went down with Ellicott City was a thing where, because the thing about that is like, it's like the people that go to Ellicott City and really appreciate that area are largely like Republican conservative people that like fancy restaurants and like fine arts and crafts and stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's all kinds of people, but like the place that they love got just demolished and destroyed twice, and now they're not doing anything about it, and there's still this like denial of like like, well, what can you do? Like,
and largely supported a gubernatorial candidate who stood against, you know, policy that would have possibly prevented the second one. Yeah, you know, so
totally.
So it's like it's just another one of those weird things where it's like, do you really know why you're conservative? You know what I mean? Do you really want to be conservative? Like,
totally. Conserve what?
Right. Yeah. What are you conserving?
I interviewed the county executive of Howard County a couple days after the Ellicott City floods happened, and I was like asking him, like, I was like, oh, well, now that this has happened again, like, do you think that it's important that we take some action on, like, you know, like climate change, because it's going to make like this happen over and over again because there's going to be more rains? And he's like, people are dying. This isn't the right time to talk about climate change. Which, like, when is, if it's not when people are dying, when is it that we're supposed to talk about it?
Yeah. I mean, a man literally disappeared trying to save a woman's freaking cat. Yeah. Like, during that whole ordeal.
Yeah.
Like,
I think she came out and said that it wasn't about her cat. But still, like, it's horrible. But it's horrible that something like that.
What was it about?
He was trying to help her.
Oh.
Yeah.
The National Guard guy with the second one.
Oh.
Yeah.
And people died in the first one too, right?
Yeah. Sad stuff. Even more sad. Brett Kavanaugh.
Oh man.
We got this story here about the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Dharna, you did this one with Christine Blasey Ford.
About Christine Blasey Ford.
About Christine Blasey Ford, yeah. Kavanaugh hearings, toxic masculinity is endemic to the far right. Let's check this out.
During Thursday's harrowing Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Palo Alto psychology professor Christine Blasey Ford outlined a detailed allegation of sexual assault against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh.
But the details about that night that bring me here today are the ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult.
Ford is one of 3 women who have publicly accused Kavanaugh of sexual assault, and the results of these hearings will impact the future of the court system and the entire country. Here to talk about what that impact could be is Henry Giroux. He's the McMaster University Chair for Scholarship in the Public Interest, and his most recent book is American Nightmare, Facing the Challenge of Fascism. Thanks for joining us today, Henry.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So again, these hearings have been really harrowing, graphic, at times really hard to listen to. Talk about what's at stake in these hearings and what their impact could be on the Supreme Court and what you're calling the fascization of America. How could they affect if Kavanaugh is confirmed? His battle is shaping up to be a major fight over how sexual assault accusations ought to be treated, and that's not all that's at stake.
Well, I think there are a number of things at stake. I mean, I think at one level what we're seeing is a display of a kind of toxic masculinity that is actually endemic to a kind of fascist politics, where a woman is seen as disposable, is seen as excess, and is seen as getting in the way, particularly when it comes to sort of articulating through their own voices the kind of suffering they've experienced, particularly at the expense of men who are privileged, who have the power to silence them, and will absolutely do anything to do that, and are completely unremorseful about what they're doing. I think, secondly, it seems to suggest that not only is such an attack visceral in terms of the pain and the suffering it inflicts on people who have been victims, but I think at the same time it begins to speak to policies that might emerge out of this court that are as anti-women, anti-just as the proceedings themselves. And that's particularly scary. I mean, I think that when any group of any element of the population is seen as so disposable, is treated with such almost visceral violence, we begin to get a whiff of something that is at work here that really isn't being talked about. And that is a kind of fascist politics that absolutely hates democracy, hates the truth, hates public participation, and is doing everything it can to hide, it would seem to me, any visible element of what it might mean to take this woman's narrative seriously and to talk basically about the crimes that are built into the system in ways that have to be addressed.
And talk about what you see as the underlying interest behind the different players here, because though, of course, Kavanaugh has displayed, just rampant toxic masculinity, neither Republicans nor Democrats can really claim a moral high ground when it comes to sexual violence. Harvey Weinstein, of course, is a major contributor to the Democratic Party. So talk about what this fight is over here.
That's really an important question, because I think that what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with both the hard and the soft versions of the same political party. I mean, these are parties that are tied to financial interests. They're tied to corporate power. They're tied to elite forms of power that in many ways have created the conditions that have allowed the Supreme Court to become utterly political. I mean, what's at stake here is not whether justice is in some way going to be heard by virtue of what is going on in the hearings themselves. But this is a system that's fundamentally flawed. It's corrupt. This is not just about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has become a mirror of the corruption. And it would seem to me that neither of these parties, though I think the Republican Party is far more extremist in some ways, or at least more overt about its own fascist and sexist impulses. I think that what we have here is two parties that are part of a broken political system. And until that system is fixed, to talk about whether the Supreme Court is going to nominate a more just, a more liberal, or a more compassionate justice, while it isn't unimportant in terms of the future, it certainly is not. It certainly misses the point in terms of addressing the underlying structures, economic, political, and social, that have contributed to the very scenario that we find ourselves in today.
So many people are watching these Kavanaugh hearings, not only because of course, the extreme impact they could have on these three women, but if confirmed, the impact that he could have on another sort of open misogynist, President Trump. And Kavanaugh supports what people call the imperial presidency, which essentially means that when in office, a president can't be indicted with a crime, only impeachment can be used against him. Talk about the impact this could have on the Supreme Court and the Trump presidency, and whether or not he actually believes in this, because he was, of course, involved in the impeachment of Bill Clinton and the investigations that went on with Clinton's sexual misconduct with Monica Lewinsky.
Well, I think it testifies to his own ideological orthodoxy. I mean, he moves with his own politics. Whenever these judgments serve his own interest, you find him sort of voting in a way that protects those interests. I think the notion that the president is, it can be ruled that the president is unimpeachable or isn't accountable for the crimes that he commits, that's straight out of the fascist playbook. I mean, let's be honest about this. This isn't just a bad legal insight or opinion. I mean, this is lawlessness parading as legality. And I think that when you have what I call legal illegalities at work in a system, that suggests that rather than talking about justice, we're talking about lawlessness. And we have to ask ourselves, what is it about that particular position that's so dangerous? What's so dangerous about that position is that the courts then become an arm for legitimizing the worst kinds of actions, whether we're talking about reversing Roe versus Wade, Citizens United. I mean, all of these policies just simply reinforce an ongoing elements of the fascist state, which seems to suggest a kind of creeping, a mobilization of passions and arguments and positions and ideologies that come closer and closer to the abyss.
So, okay, at the time that we're recording this, the Senate just had their preliminary vote. It looks like Kavanaugh is going to get confirmed by the time y'all are seeing this. Yeah. I don't know. We'll probably put this out on Saturday. So by that time, probably Kavanaugh will be our new Supreme Court justice, which I don't really have anything else to add besides what I've already said.
Yeah, it's a scary time.
It is.
This guy is extremely problematic. But it's just, it's just another example right now how arrogant this administration is, how arrogant the far right is to, like, push this dude, even though, like, it's a terrible time to have this dude on the Supreme Court. But what were we supposed to say, to the same country that shamed Anita Hill for, we have not come far at all.
No.
On so many issues. Like, I was thinking about this the other night. I was like, yo, the world is literally, like, looking at us and watching us and laughing at how we deal with race, how we deal with women's rights. I mean, of course, there are places that it's a lot worse.
Yeah.
But the fact that we stand on this world stage as if, like, we're the greatest, and, we got douchebags like Brett Kavanaugh as Supreme Court Justice. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, it's a shame.
I wanted to say that, I don't know if you guys agree, but there's something particularly weird about seeing, like, a Maryland scumbags, like, behavior come to light. Like, I don't know. I just, growing up in, like, Catonsville and everything, I feel like I'm, like, kind of familiar with these types of people, and like, just seeing it be like, yeah, he like threw a drink at dude at, like, the UB40 concert.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's so familiar, and it's like, it's so weird to see one of those kind of guys go all the way to the top.
Yeah.
And everything comes out, and they still, it's fine.
But it's indicative of the type of people they are, right? Like if you've spent any time around frat boys, or, I'm prior military, so, like, the military, white boy jugheads or whatever, like, they think that shit like this is funny. And they get their rocks off of shit like this. You know what I mean? Of just, like, totally disregarding morality, standards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just saying, yo, let's watch this. Let's get our guy Brett up there and watch they can't do anything about it. Like, like, this is funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy because, like, I'm sure all of us know hundreds of stories like this from people at, like, places like University of Maryland.
Yeah.
And it's like, all of these things can be so easily overlooked until somebody has, like, the platform of being in, like, a Senate hearing.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
like, it doesn't make them any less important. Like, the hundreds of other, like, mostly women who I know who have gone through shit like this are, I think, sitting there being like, yeah, I mean, like, same,
Yeah.
So
I heard something the other day about these polls that are saying that the people that are really being energized by this are right-wing women who feel angry that this is even happening, and are feeling, energized more now to vote. And I couldn't believe it. And like, I just can't even figure out what that is. Is it like they don't want to feel like their brothers or fathers would get held to that same standard, or something like? I don't know what
I think a lot of it is. I think some of it is, like, the Christian value system, and, like, in a lot of Christianity in different sects, like, the women are supposed to just support the husband. The husband is the head of the household, and it's just kind of, they're supposed to, like, follow along with them, and when you get people who are really strict Christians, like, they just want to go to heaven, man. You know what I mean? Like, they're not really trying to ruffle too many feathers while they're here, because they're being taught that, there's this magical place upstairs laid up for them if they just ride it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of, it's sad when you really think about it.
yeah. I also think that, like, you sort of see some, like, right-wing women looking at this and being like, oh, this is all just the product of, like, the sexual revolution for women. Like, this wouldn't have happened if we all didn't have this, like, big feminist moment where everybody, like, thinks that they can have, like, free love. This is what happened. Women got themselves into it, and that means that all of that shit was wrong, which is, like, terrifying, but I guess there's like a weird internal logic there.
Yeah.
That's interesting though. Where did you read? I would love to read that.
I heard that on WYPR.
Word.
Oh wow.
I don't want to harp on this and I'm not even sure I have these details right, but you guys did hear about the UB40 show, right?
No.
So one of his friends went on the news and was like, we went to a UB40 show in DC in 1985 and then went to a bar after, and we saw this guy and thought he was the lead singer, and like they came up to like give him dap, and he was like, what are you talking about? And they got like the dude Mark Cavanaugh got mad and like threw a drink on him, and then like a bar fight spilled out.
Wow.
That was another thing. I don't know. I'm just like, that's so familiar as far as just like,
like it's not
Baltimore or Maryland bonehead behavior.
Yeah.
I feel like it would have been a lot more commendable if he would have just owned that.
Oh yeah, that's not. I'm not saying it's like disqualifying. But
No,
like, the guy just saying like, he's saying he's like this, but I just randomly was at this show and here's what went on.
Yeah.
Like you and I like spend our life in like bars, and there's no time when like, oh yeah, I thought this guy was like Plies, so I like, you know, like
I thought this
hit
guy
him
was
with
Plies.
a bar stool.
Oh my god.
Yeah, how did that escalate?
Right.
I thought this guy at the bar was Height Keech, so
Oh man. All right, so moving on, we got the other night, Wednesday night. Was it Wednesday? We had a panel discussion here about HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, the future of them, hosted by our co-host, Dr. Khalil M Harris, Esquire, who's not with us here this week. Shout out to Khalila. But she led this, and we want to just go over a quick clip from that.
I remember Dave Chappelle once made a joke that if we got reparations, all that would do is make Cadillac the #1 car dealership. I mean, because if they're just going to waste the money or don't know what to do with the money, more importantly, because nobody's ever shown them anything other than what they've always been doing, then they're just doomed to recycle and fail all over again.
Well, at first I was going to say you're right in that one should be able to critique any academic institution to improve. Retention rates are problematic. There's certainly, but it's not like, again, there are other academic institutions where funds go missing. So it's not the case that it is just simply, however, whenever we have these conversations, there's always somebody in the room who talks about, well, you know, there's this black college where this happened, and you never talk about the 50 where it has also happened.
But here's the thing, though, we don't
but then
care
the other,
about other colleges. That's always our fallback.
But the idea is that, well, I'm not going to give you what you're owed because you're going to misspend it. You know what? It doesn't matter how a person spends it. It's still owed. But there's just a degree of disrespect and acceptance, you know, of racist ideology about the incompetence of black people that's in that statement that I just have to say we can't continue to say those types of things.
Okay,
because they're just not true, and it's just used to
This is going to be your last point.
No, I get that.
Because we're just going to move on, but I appreciate the
All right, so being in the room the other night for that discussion, I thought was really interesting. I did not attend an HBCU, although I always wanted to. But I think the cool thing was like one of the women on the panel kept pushing, like, in order for HBCUs to survive, like the alumni have to give. You know, the alumni have to be there. The alumni have to help support this institution. And the conversation and dialogue that went around, like, how much the HBCUs have to work with, you know, versus how much is owed to them, right? Because we totally forget about the reason why HBCUs exist in the first place, right? Is because, like, there was a time in this country where we could not go to the same schools. And so these institutions were created to educate black people. Today they educate more than just black people. And I don't know. I just thought it was a pretty fascinating discussion.
Yeah, the amount of people I think still, which is particularly shocking in a place like Baltimore, which is like over 60% black, who still don't understand the need for HBCUs is like incredible. I was talking to my friend about this the other day, who is in graduate school for English, and he was talking to me about how this woman named Shauna Green Benjamin did this like big super foundational black feminist scholar interview with this super foundational black feminist scholar, Nellie McKay, who was talking about getting her PhD at Harvard. And she was writing a dissertation on black women writers, and she had to like photocopy copies of Zora Neale Hurston's books because nobody would print them.
Oh,
and
wow.
like, yeah, nobody would print Zora Neale Hurston. And so to like, that was only what, in the 70s?
Wow.
And it's like it's what, not even 50 years later. So
wow.
to hear people in Baltimore being like, why can't we all just have the same colleges is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
What do you mean her books were just totally out of print?
Nope, nobody would publish them because they were like so radical or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was like you had the like first editions and you just had to photocopy them.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
You know Kate Ferenz.
Yeah.
Right. She told me before about coming to Baltimore for shows and stuff and noticing, like, compared to like New York and Philadelphia where she's grew up and lived, like there's like within like academic circles and artistic circles and stuff, she's like, I've never seen segregation like this.
Like Baltimore.
Yeah, and the example she gave was like going to Great Blacks and Wax Museum and then hanging out with some people at Micah, and they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's right there. And, but like, you know, there's like this crazy segregation here still. That's I mean, it's probably everywhere to some degree. Yeah. But it's really
you and I've
pronounced
talked
here.
a lot about that, like on the road, how there's like, and it's starting to get a little better, I think, you know, with like, you know, scenes like the art scene and Station North and stuff like that. They're starting to cross a little bit more, but it really is like, it has been for a long time, like two Baltimores.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a white Baltimore and there's a black Baltimore, and those experiences are usually very different and very segregated. Like it's nothing in Baltimore like to go somewhere and be the only black dude in the room.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
Or the only white dude.
Yeah.
You know, in the room. It's kind of weird for it to be a East Coast northern state.
Right.
Northern city, like, yeah.
It's funny because I think some people would hear what you said about like how Baltimore is so segregated and then would be like, see, that's why we don't need HBCUs because we need everything to be integrated. But like, it should be the so-called integrated universities that are reaching out to like black people and people of color to bring them in. It shouldn't have to be like, we open up the HBCUs and then white people just get everything. Rich people just get so.
Yeah, somebody on the panel made a point to that the other night, like, because they were like, look, we have like historically Catholic universities, we have like all these other different types of schools that people can go to, but most of them bring in predominantly white students, you know, whereas like even HBCUs are accepting so many students of other nationalities, and like, but that history is still important to have. And then for black children, you know, I mean, I think like I agree with a lot of what was said the other night. Like, you know, there's a particular kind of self-worth that you get from going to an HBCU. I mean, just my friends who've gone and being around them, like this is Morgan homecoming weekend. Shout out to everybody from Morgan, all the alumni and students. Like, you know, when you go around that crowd, there is like this sense of like pride and self-worth that, like, you know, I think any parent would want their child to have when they go off to college. You know?
Yeah, and there's so many things that are like valuable to the whole city. Like, you know, I went in on 88.9 for canceling some of these shows a minute ago. But there's so many things, like even just like strictly hip hop and stuff like that. It's like it's just like an institution that it just wouldn't be there at like UMBC or something like that.
Yeah. Derek Chase was on the panel, and he talked about the huge basketball tournament that they have, and how they basically were able to leverage the space at Coppin because it is a state-of-the-art, one of the newest gyms and one of the largest, I think the largest gym in the U.S. or something, which I didn't know. But like it was the first time they did it, I think it was in Chicago, and then they moved it to somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then it's been here the past 2 or 3 years. And he talked about the challenge of that, because he said one of the stakeholders or investors that they were at the table with was like, well, why not do it at Towson?
Yeah.
And it's like, why do we have to go outside of the city? Yeah. You know what I mean, to do this, you know what I mean? And that's that whitewashing that like constantly happens, you know what I mean? You see, you hear Amy, what's her name, the comedian, Amy
Schumer.
Amy Schumer. So well, I lived in Baltimore. I went to Towson. That's not.
Wait, Amy Schumer lived in Baltimore?
Yes, she went to Towson.
Yeah.
And she always talks like how shitty Baltimore was or whatever, and it's like, you wasn't in Baltimore. You were in Towson. Towson is not Baltimore City. Like,
she got arrested at the Kavanaugh protest.
I know. I saw somebody post a picture of her in line getting processed. Crazy. That's awesome. She got points for me on that.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a lot to come back from.
Yeah. I'm not an Amy Schumer fan.
I'm not an Amy Schumer fan.
Towson still might be like kind of rough compared to like, she's from like Long Island or something.
Oh, word.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Oh God. I mostly grew up in Towson, and to hear someone say like Towson might be still kind of rough compared to, it's just like hilarious.
Well, I feel like there was like a bunch of my friends that lived around Towson when I was in high school. I'm trying to think. I can't remember the neighborhood names, but like, people would be like, "No, I'm not from Towson. Like,
I'm from Overlook, or like,
well,
Stoneleigh or something.
Yeah, well, I'm from the other side of the city line.
Right.
Yeah. That's funny. This week is also Fleet Week.
Oh yeah, Fleet Week.
Speaking of horrible Baltimore traditions, well, I don't know. What do you think about Fleet Week?
It's like it's not just Baltimore, right?
Yeah, they do it everywhere.
Yeah,
this is just like the one, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I feel like I was in the Navy. Fleet Week was always it's a blur. Like I remember, a lot of drinking and a lot of, sinful things happening. From my end as a military person, being 20, 21, 22 years old. Like, it was just always like a good time for us. But since I got out, I never really paid much attention to it until it's happening. But it's kind of weird. Like, it's like the planes, and I don't know, who knows how much pollution they're putting in the air just to do that, just to have fun, and like.
It's also $100,000 an hour.
Yeah.
$100,000 an hour. Like.
Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous.
This is another statistic that I don't know if this is real or current or whatever, but I remember hearing at one point the military is like the largest polluter that exists.
Yeah.
In the US.
Yeah.
It is crazy to think about.
I think now
it's
the second largest, but still, yes.
What's the largest? Sorry.
Man, I should know things.
I can believe it, man. I mean, like, you just think like the ships and how much waste they put out into the water, the amount of pollution or toxins from the planes flying, discarding of ammunition to, I mean, you name it. Like, it's like, but we need our military though. That's the argument. It's like, what are you going to do? If we don't do this, then China's just going to run up on us, like, out of nowhere.
Okay, the U.S. military is still the world's biggest polluter.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
But like, what are they doing? They're just flying
the world's,
like flying planes wherever over Baltimore. Like, what is this?
Yeah, it's just rich white boys playing with their toys.
Let's go.
For all of us. $100,000 an hour. I also just like, wasn't it? I think it might have been somebody on The Whole Bushel who came on and was like, every time, like every year when this happens, I just imagine like that if we were in Syria right now, you'd be looking up and hearing the sound and be like, oh shit, like my house is about to get destroyed. Yeah. But here we're just like, oh, this is fun. Yeah. Look, it's like crazy.
Yeah, who was that? Was that Max Beats?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, that's such a strong point. Like, yeah, we're like, oh look, this is wonderful, and then like somebody else hears that sound, and it's like, oh shit, we are about to die.
Yeah.
We should title this episode "We're About to Die."
How we are about to die.
How we're all going to die. It's come up several times so far. We are all going to die. This week on the Baltimore Bureau podcast, Eze Jackson and Dharna discuss with Height Keech how we're all going to die.
Oh, Baynard would be proud.
He would be so proud.
He would be so proud.
I think that's all we got for you this week, y'all. Thank you again for tuning in. As always, we really appreciate all of your support and watching the show and specifically donating. We are a nonprofit news organization. We don't do any corporate funding or any advertising, so this is all viewer funded. The podcast show is actually an idea that came from the viewers, so if you haven't donated already, please do. If you have donated, thank you so much. Big thank you to Stephen Frank, Will Arenas, David Hebden, who are behind the scenes on visuals and audio and making sure this is up on podcasts for you. Shout out to Jocelyn Dombrowski, who takes our photos every week. And
shout out to Height Keech.
Shout out to Height Keech, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah,
you
bro.
gotta come back as we get to hear more about this new shit you're working on.
Oh, tight. Thank you.
Yeah, man. 1000th show, November 2nd.
Yes.
At Metro Gallery. Check that out. We are going to go out with a Height Keech song because it's only appropriate every week we end with some Baltimore music. This is Zen on 10. Let's go. See y'all next time.
Now the crash looms and the doom grows, but the mind still shines when the moon glows. Gotta head west, hit the deep freeze. Now it's part 5, dive in the deep seas. Zen on 10, Zen on 10. Zen on 10, Zen on 10. Fly the freak flag, hit the war drums. Stay down, keep warm if the storm comes. Get your head clean, get your soul bright. Do the hard slide jog through the whole night. Let the dream talk, let it burn hot. Do the cool hurt, do the mic wide. Gotta raise up, gotta break brains. Gotta blast new blood into these